In 22 years of service to the Aldrin household, Edmund Greer had never heard the kitchen go that quiet. He had watched the dining room fall still the way a forest falls still when something large moves through it, and he had understood, over time, that the quiet around Cormac Aldrin was not the absence of something. It was the presence of something too large and too certain to need announcement. He had been present for dismissals, for uninvited arrivals handled in under 3 minutes, for a dozen moments that left other men pale-faced and wordless. In all of it, the kitchen had remained its own world, the one place Cormac Aldrin did not go. Until the second Thursday of January. That morning, a Thursday, the second week of January, frost still hard on the kitchen garden, began the way every morning on the estate began. Edmund arrived at the study at 6:30. The fires had already been laid. The correspondence was sorted on the desk. Downstairs, the kitchen staff moved with the efficiency that 20 years of the same routine produces, unhurried, practiced, each person in the right place at the right time. Nessa was not in the right place. She had been hired 26 days earlier as a kitchen assistant, the lowest rung, the one nobody noticed, the one that drew no comment from the housekeeper beyond adequate, and no comment from the cook beyond a short nod when she correctly identified the morning's herb order. She was quiet in the way a person is quiet when they have learned that drawing attention costs more than it gains. She moved carefully. She double-checked things. The other assistants found her slightly odd for it, and they left her alone. Edmund barely knew her name at that point. He would remember it before the morning was out. The weekly delivery arrived at 7:30, as it always did, crates of dry goods from the estate's regular supplier, checked in at the kitchen door by the cook second. Nessa was not assigned to the delivery check. She was wiping down the cold preparation counter when the crates were stacked near the dry larder, and she would have been nowhere near them if the cook second had not been called away to the morning room on an errand for Miss Voss. Miss Aldine Voss had been Dorothea Aldrin's social secretary for 6 months. She was smooth and efficient and wore her competence the way some people wear armor, visibly, so that everyone nearby understood the cost of questioning it. She had come with strong references and a quiet confidence that the household had mistaken, in those early months, for capable reserve. She managed Dorothea's correspondence, her appointments, the careful social calendar of a woman whose health had made her largely housebound. She was very good at making sure the right things did not reach Dorothea, though nobody had yet put it in those terms. Nessa was not thinking about Miss Voss when she noticed the jar. She was returning a set of tins to the dry larder shelf when her hand found a glass jar she did not recognize in the position the almond flour tin should have been. The label read almond flour, in the supplier's standard print. The contents looked the same, fine, pale, powdery. She might have set it back without a second thought if she had not, the week prior, read the household's posted allergy notice in full. She had read it because she read everything posted in a new position. It was a habit she had brought from before, from a smaller household where an oversight had cost a child a frightening afternoon and cost her a very long night of asking herself what she had missed. The notice listed Dorothea Aldrin's known allergens. Ground walnut was among them. Severe reaction. No exceptions. Nessa stood in the cold larder and looked at the jar. Ground walnut and almond flour, in their raw powdered forms, look nearly identical. The difference is in the smell and in the texture if you know what to touch for. Nessa had worked in a bakery for 2 years before the household positions, and she knew both. She held the jar near the small larder window and opened it carefully. The smell was wrong. The texture, when she touched the pad of one finger to the top layer of powder, was wrong. She did not panic. She did not call out. She did not, at any point, make a scene that the kitchen or anyone beyond it would need to manage. She set the jar aside on the preparation counter. She found the correct almond flour tin in the back of the same shelf, where it had been pushed behind 2 other tins. She completed the arrangement of the dry larder correctly. Then she wrapped the wrong jar carefully in a clean cloth, carried it to the kitchen's record table where the delivery receipts were kept, and looked through the morning's incoming paperwork until she found the substitution order, the handwritten form that accompanied any change to the standard delivery. The substitution order was signed. The signature was Miss Voss's. Nessa stood at the record table for a moment. She was not a person who moved quickly toward conclusions. She had learned that the fastest explanations are usually the wrong ones, and that there was always a possibility she had missed something. She thought through what she had, a mislabeled jar of a severe allergen in the place the household used for baking for Dorothea's breakfast tray. A substitution order authorizing its delivery, signed by the person who managed Dorothea's household arrangements and who had sent the delivery checker away from the door this morning on an errand. She folded the substitution order and wrapped it with the jar in the cloth. Then she went and found Mr. Greer. Edmund was in the corridor outside the study when she appeared at the end of the hall, a small, quiet figure in the kitchen assistant's plain uniform, carrying something wrapped in cloth. He had been on his way to deliver the morning's letters. He stopped. He was, in the first moment, slightly irritated. Kitchen staff did not approach this corridor without a reason, and quiet kitchen assistants with their eyes level and their hands steady were not, in his experience, people who came upstairs without something pressing. She told him quietly, in plain terms, what she had found, and what she had done, and what the substitution order said, and whose signature was on it. Edmund looked at her for a long moment. Then he knocked on the study door. What followed happened in the way that things happen when Cormac Aldrin decides they will happen, with a velocity and a thoroughness that left no edges unsecured. Edmund was inside the study for 11 minutes. In that time, Cormac had read the substitution order, held the jar to the window as Nessa had held it to the larder window, made 2 telephone calls, and reached a conclusion that did not require further discussion. He stood up from behind the desk. He walked to the study door. He walked down the corridor, past the drawing room, past the gallery, through the service door, down the back stairs, and into the kitchen. Edmund followed him, because there was nothing else to do. The kitchen went quiet the way the dining room went quiet, the way the forest goes quiet, not with fright, exactly, but with the complete attention of every person in the room being pulled, involuntarily, toward one point. The cook turned from the range. The 2 assistants at the preparation table put down what they were holding. The boy moving crates near the larder door stopped where he stood. Cormac Aldrin stood in the kitchen doorway and looked across the room. He said, "Nessa." That was all. One word. Her name, in a voice that Edmund had not heard him use before, not softened, exactly, because Cormac Aldrin did not do soft in the way most people meant it, but waited. Specific. The voice of a man who had registered something important and was acknowledging it directly. Nessa looked up from the counter where she had gone back to her work. She met his eyes without flinching. He held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he nodded, once, the way he nodded at the men who had been with him longest, and turned and walked back upstairs. Edmund had worked for him for 22 years. He had never seen him nod at anyone like that in a kitchen. By 10:30, Aldine Voss was gone. The dismissal was handled through the family's solicitors, clean and complete. The investigation of the kitchen records surfaced 4 previous substitution orders over the course of 6 months, each small enough to have been dismissed individually as clerical error, each in the same handwriting, each affecting a delivery that touched Dorothea's household arrangements. A pattern. Careful and slow and entirely deliberate. A formal notation was made with the household guild and filed with the family's legal office. No noise. No spectacle. Only consequence, which was, Edmund had long since understood, the only kind of justice that lasted. Dorothea Aldrin's morning room door, which had been quietly growing harder to reach over the preceding months, appointments cancelled at the last moment, correspondence delayed, visitors turned away on the grounds of the mistress's fatigue, opened again that afternoon. Edmund brought her morning letters himself. She was sitting by the window in the pale winter sun, and she looked at him when he came in with an expression he had not seen on her face in some time. Not surprise. Something closer to relief. It was the new girl, wasn't it? Dorothea said. It was not a question. Yes, ma'am, Edmund said. She nodded. She looked back at the window. Tell her, she said quietly, that I take my breakfast tea with honey. Not sugar. She'll want to know. Edmund delivered the message. Nessa listened with her head slightly tilted, the way she listened to everything, and said she would remember. The weeks that followed settled into a different order than the weeks before. Dorothea's mornings grew easier. The household breathed differently, not visibly, not in any way that Edmund could have named precisely to an outsider, but differently. He noticed it in the kitchen, where Nessa moved with the same careful precision she had always had, but now without the particular quality of watchfulness that comes from not knowing yet whether a place is safe. She had begun to know the estate, and it had begun to know her. Cormac said nothing to her directly in those weeks. He was not a man who explained himself or narrated his decisions. But Edmund observed, and observing was his trade, that Cormac came through the ground floor corridor after supper on 3 occasions when his usual route would not have brought him there, and that on each of those occasions he slowed slightly as he passed the kitchen door, and that on one of them the door was open and Nessa was at the record table going over the next morning's orders, and he stood there for a moment in the doorway, not announcing himself, only standing there, before he moved on. Edmund did not mention this to anyone. At the end of the month, on a quiet Friday evening when the household accounts were closed and the week's records filed, Edmund delivered the account ledgers to the study as usual. He found Cormac already finished, the desk cleared, the lamp turned low, Cormac standing at the window looking out at the kitchen garden. In his hand was a small ring of keys. Old keys, polished with long use, iron worn smooth at the bows. Edmund recognized them. They had been his late wife's household keys, the set that gave access to the still room, the linen stores, the silver cabinet, the household accounts safe. Cormac had kept them in the desk drawer since her death, 11 years ago. He had not given them to the housekeeper. He had not given them to any of the senior staff. Edmund had never asked about them, and Cormac had never explained. "Where is she?" Cormac said. Edmund did not ask who. "The record table," he said. "She stays late on Fridays." Cormac nodded. He walked downstairs. Edmund did not follow this time. He stood at the study window and looked out at the dark garden. He heard nothing, no raised voices, no sound of consequence. Only the house, quiet and settled, the way it had been quieter and more settled with each passing week. After a time, he heard footsteps on the back stairs, one set, measured and deliberate. Cormac's. He passed the study door and continued down the corridor without stopping. Edmund went downstairs himself, 10 minutes later. Nessa was at the record table as she had been. The week's inventory was neatly finished. The lamp was on. On the corner of the table, where she could not have missed it, lay the ring of old keys. She was looking at them. She looked up at Edmund when he came in, and for a moment neither of them spoke. She was not a person who made a great deal of her feelings. Neither was he. But he had worked for Cormac Aldrin for 22 years and had never once seen those keys leave that drawer, and whatever was on his face when he looked at the ring of iron and polished steel told her something, because she looked back down at them with an expression he could only describe, afterward and privately, as the expression of a person who has been seen clearly for the first time in a very long while. She picked the keys up gently. She held them for a moment, the way a person holds something they intend to take care of. "Good night, Mr. Greer," she said. "Good night," he said. He went back upstairs. He sat down at the desk in the study, in the low lamplight, and thought, as he thought often in those weeks, about what kind of man Cormac Aldrin was beneath the stillness that kept every rival and most of his own household at a careful distance. He had worked for him for 22 years and had answered that question differently at different points, a hard man, a fair man, a man who kept his word and his grief with equal silence. He had not, until this winter, thought to add, a man waiting for someone steady enough to trust. The kitchen garden lay dark and cold beyond the window. In 11 years, he had not given those keys to anyone. He had given them to her in under a month. Edmund Greer thought about that for a long time. Then he straightened the account ledger on the desk, turned the lamp lower, and left the study to the quiet.